What's up, everybody? Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm not Necrotic Nick.
He's definitely not Necrotic Nick. We checked.
I am Jammin, JON.
He is Jammin, JON, we think.
We checked.
We didn't. Anyway, we have an album review for you, and one that I at least wanted to go over because I went over the last one, and I was kind of curious about this one just because, man, this band is highly respected in terms of the whole Italian brutal death metal scene. And, I mean, I can definitely see why. So we are going to go over the latest offering from Vomit the Soul, Massive Incineration. This also comes out on the 6th of June on Unique Leader Records. This band formed in 2000 in Italy. This is their fourth album overall and second since reforming in 2011. They broke up for a bit in 2009, which it took them a little while to get going and put out another album that came out with Cold in 2021. I actually went over it, and it was just a slab of just intense, brutal death metal. And, well, over the years, at least in between this album and their last one, there's been a retooling of the lineup. Now, the only original member of this band is their longtime guitarist and singer, Max Santarelli. He is ever present still, but on this one, their bassist from the last album moved over to guitar, so this is their first one as a four-piece because they recruited a new bassist and a new drummer. The old drummer apparently left after the last one, and yeah, this kind of is a bit of a new jumping off point for the band. While it is 100% brutal death metal, without a doubt, this is definitely a little bit different in terms of, well, just the approach of it. It's still got its slams, it's still got tons of blast beats, vocals that sound like a drain unclogging or a demon pig, take your pick. But I think this album has a little bit more of a sense of dynamics, and man, in terms of everything I have listened to by this band, this might be their riffiest album yet.
I have never heard this band until today, until 38 minutes ago, because that's what we're working with. Nick, of course, whom has heard everything, it's a challenge to find bands that Nick hasn't heard of, and I implore you guys to reach out and say if you heard this band, because I guarantee that 97% of the time he's heard it. Anyway, I'd never heard it. And he said, this is Italian brutal death metal. And I said, ooh. And then he said, this is very fast. And I said, ooh. And he compared it to a lot of fast things. And I said, that's pretty neat. But I got this record instead. And much like he said, it has definitely more dynamic because he compared it easily to old Evangelic, old Hour of Penance. And I was thinking like, okay, I know exactly what I'm getting into. And I got into that. Plus a little bit more. Opens up with Annihilate the Infernal Army. First of all, some of these song titles, and we'll get to them, I absolutely adore. There are great song titles in here. Anyway, gets right into it. Immediate brutality and tremolo. And that wasn't something I was necessarily expecting either, because when you think of super fast, you do think of tremolo, but not as a melody that carries a groove.
Yeah. And I was kind of surprised with the fact that there are a lot of harmonized tremolos on here, which, you know, harmonizing isn't necessarily like the biggest thing in brutal death metal, and considering this band was a three-piece for the longest time, like, granted they did multi-track the guitars, but there weren't a tremendous amount of harmonies. Like, it was just pretty much get down to the next disgusting riff. But this one spent some time harmonizing the riffs, and not in like a cheesy, like, oh my god, we are going to be melodic as hell way. Right. Like, no, let's add some more weight to it. But the thing that I wasn't expecting on here was, this is probably their grooviest album. Like, it definitely has tons of blast beats, but the groovy sections on this album, they hang on to longer than I think I've heard on any of their albums.
Very comparable to Dying Fetus. I'm just going to come out and say it. Like, they took this from the Dying Fetus playbook and they said, okay, we're going to still keep a little bit of our flavor, but we're going to really play with what you guys are throwing out there. For the most part, this record is heavy as shit, with a lot of chuggy, like, more mid-tempo moments.
Yeah, and, I mean, the Dying Fetus playbook, I mean, I want to say John Gallagher pretty much said it best in terms of Dying Fetus's formula is to be as brutal and as heavy as they possibly can, but also have hooks and good, solid riffs. And this album definitely exemplifies that because, like, this honestly just has, like, some of the catchiest riffs I've ever heard from this band. And they know when to stick with them. Their last album, Cold, while I liked it, was like a little bit stiff. Like, it was kind of a more blast beat affair. Like, yeah, it definitely had its groovier pockets, but it just felt, I don't know, like, you know, just kind of machine-like. This feels a little bit looser. The transitions feel a bit smoother. And this one really just lays on the catchy riffs. And a good variety of them too. Like you get your good chuggy, almost kind of thrashy moments, heavy tremolos, again, now harmonized. And of course, giant slam riffs. Slam riffs that have bad intentions for your body if you're anywhere near the pit. Like these riffs don't mess around with misdemeanors, they got felonies.
And multiple ones at that.
And you even get like some classic isolated drop-ins, like Mark of Blasphemy in the title track. They isolate that riff, they let it kind of soak in a little bit, and then just come in with the big drop-in, bass drop, into the groove, let's get going. And I think this album does that quite a bit better than previous albums have.
Again, I have nothing to compare it to. I did listen to a little bit of Cold before we got down here, but like, to me, this just sounds like the things I like about brutal death metal. Don't get me wrong, I like going fast. Everybody likes going fast. I'm Ricky Bobby. But it's a good mixture of blast, slams, groove, and brutality. Like, they don't sacrifice any of the brutality, but there's just groove all over this. And riffy as shit. Like, this whole album, every song has probably 10 riffs in it that are pretty awesome. And those are things I like. And there's no pig squeals, and I'm thankful for that.
I mean, there's a couple of, like, ultra low, brutal gurgles.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to say Max is kind of, like, working that balance between, John Gallagher and Sean Beasley. Like, he's kind of doing a little bit of both. Like, there's some higher register-ish vocals. Like, he just kind of comes out of the whole, like, sewer gurgle for a little bit and kind of throws in, like, a classic death metal roar. But that's, like, a dynamic that I really don't think has been that present before. Because their first album especially, like, the vocals are just down in the depths, just gargling on vomit and bile just to get a good take. And, I mean, it fits. It's brutal death metal, it's supposed to sound disgusting. But I like the fact that the dynamics will flip along with the music on here. The music itself is constantly moving around still, like, again, blasts, tremolos, big slammy breakdown grooves, and just, like, riffy sections. But here it seems to flow a lot better. Like, transition-wise, all these songs, they kind of lose the rigidness that were on, maybe some of their earlier albums. And there's a lot of riffs that, like, literally just jump out and grab you by the ears because they are super catchy. Call to the Abyss, Repulsive Shores into Oblivion, Endless Dark Solstice. All these just have, like, good, solid, energetic, but brutal hooks. Again, nothing on here is, like, flat out, like, melodic as hell or anything. And they're not wasting a lot of time with, like, any pretense, any interludes, or any samples. It's just get down to it and, break faces.
And back to transitions, too. Blood Time, which, I mean, sounds like a good time, right? Mm-hmm. It's blood time.
Actually, you know what I think it sounds like?
What's that?
I think that's what brutal death metal dudes say when they're old ladies on the rag. It's like, oh, yeah, no, we can't do the, the whole thing because, it's blood time.
But, yeah. That has some great transitions, and weird how well they flow, because there are some big changes in that song that happen, like, almost instantaneously, but somehow they found a way to slow it down just a little bit to kind of glide into it. And that happens a lot in this record, actually. There are a lot of just interesting transitional moments which wouldn't work if they didn't do it right, but it was smooth.
And a lot of this, I wouldn't say is like revolutionary, reinventing the wheel. A lot of these are tropes of the genre itself, except they're done really well. And there's some stuff in here that this band generally didn't do as much before where it actually stands out. Like groove being probably the main thing because it's noticeable right out of the gate. If you've been listening to this band for a while, the groovier elements in here honestly kind of dominate this. Mm-hmm. But just because there's like slightly less blast beats in here, it does not dull the impact. Like these songs are out to fight. And I think part of that is the production and, well, possibly the lineup shift, there being like two guitarists in terms of like, guitar work to play off of one another. But the production on here, it feels way thicker. Like there's more to it. Like compared to Cold sounded fine. It was a little bit on the dry side.
A little bit thin too.
Yeah. This one, the drums sound much more full. They don't necessarily have like the brutal death metal sound. Like it's not super, super clicky, and the snare doesn't have like a ungodly ping to it. And the guitars just have more body to them. They just sound more full. And I think that, at least for me, makes the sound a ton heavier.
Well, yeah. If you had meat to the guitars versus having them be kind of paper thin and, let the drums come out and play a little bit heavy, because usually in most brutal death for me, I find that the drums sit really out front, and it's that pingy snare that drives me up the fucking wall. But like normally beef isn't something in Brutality necessarily, although Dying Fetus plays with them. Obviously, Suffocation's guitars are about as beefy as it gets. But, like, yeah, I mean, you get 2 guitars now, so you want to kind of show off the fact that you have the need for 2 guitars, you know? Like in Repulsive Shores into Oblivion, that song has probably, I think, some of the chuggiest moments and the heftiest moments in this record. But another thing I like about this, too, is the drums in that song are unrelenting. Even when they get into this start-stop riff pattern, that double kick is flying throughout the entire song.
Yeah, that song in particular has like some really unique riffs that really don't show up on the rest of the album. Like they're slightly more technical, a little bit kind of outside of the box. Like it's not just like the same brooding chugs. And the breakdown in particular on that song is, absolutely just filthy. Market Blasphemy still might have possibly the heaviest breakdown in there just because it's a halftime one. This song starts off slow. It's more brooding. Like, it's still thinking about all the horrible things that it wants to do to you before it actually does it. Like, the rest of the songs kind of just, charge at you with a hammer or an axe or a chainsaw or whatever they have at the moment. And again, the hooks on here, and the hooks being very specifically, like, more Dying Fetus aligned. Mm-hmm. Church of Losers, which might be one of my favorite titles on this entire album. And spoiler alert, if you bought one of Trump's Bibles online, guess what church you belong to?
Luckily, the worship band is on point.
Anyway, if you open that book to Morons, 3:16 or whatever, you'll probably find the lyrics to the song making fun of you. But the big thing about this song is just groovy, riffy hooks. There's a Dying Fetus bounce in there. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the one where, everyone in the pit's just gonna just go absolutely apeshit. But it's also probably one of the songs in here that I would say has maybe a little bit more melody than other tracks. Like, there's just like a good, almost kind of melodic hook towards the end. Like, all right, like that's as pleasant as this album has sounded at any point, or at least like as pleasant as it will sound to someone that might not be into brutal death metal or death metal at all.
Yeah.
Being fair.
They definitely use those tremolos to their advantage. They're more than just hooks. The opening to Blood Time is catchy right from the rip.
This album also features a re-recording of Third from their first album. And, I mean, I know it's probably like sacrilege to say to like the early fans of this band in terms of Italian brutal death metal, this is like God tier one. I prefer the production and the whole vibe of this version to the original. I have the original, and I like it. It's good, but this production, I think, I don't know, it's just, better sounding. I just don't like the production of that first one. But in terms of any negatives on here, I mean, honestly, like, it's kind of a wash, because while I could definitely say, this band definitely stays in this lane, and it's not reinventing the wheel by any, stretch of the imagination at all, it's still doing what they do well and executing some things better than they have before, namely because I think they kind of expanded their sound and added a lot of groove. I think the groove on here really matters because it kind of just opens up this album a bit. Like, there's some actual empty space in between the batterings that, this band is definitely known for. So I'm kind of torn because, again, it is sort of a one-dimensional, one-gear sort of album, but at the same time, I feel like they expanded their sound within that lane that they frequently travel. So, I really don't have much negative to say here.
As for me and negatives, I don't really have any either, I've never heard this band before today. So getting into this, I was described something totally different, and I was ready to get into that. And then I got to this, and again, this is everything I like about brutal death metal. Said it before, I'll say it again, good mix of blast, chug, slam, and brutality. And even a little bit more melody. Like, I just wasn't expecting that, and it ended up being something completely different, and I like all the heavy, groovy, chuggy moments. You know me. If you've been watching this channel forever, you know me by now. I like chuggy and dissonant tremolos and things like that. And there's stuff like that in there, so I don't really have any complaints.
Honestly, I was thinking about it, and, if I were to recommend a Vomit the Soul album to someone that was, just getting into brutal death metal, they're kind of looking at it a little bit differently, I want to check that stuff out. I've been listening to, the old school stuff for a while, or maybe they've been listening to deathcore, and they kind of want to get on the light side of the force, the dark side of the force. I don't know. It's one of the sides. They're on opposite ends of the force. But I would recommend this one just because it's more hooky, it's more groove laden, and I think it's just a little bit easier to get into right out of the rip. And it has in no way lost any edge whatsoever, which I think is important.
Yeah, I think it's more digestible than some brutal death metal. And don't get me wrong, again, we like crazy, wacky bands, but like I could see if you were going to show somebody a heavy record and they said, hey, this is what I like two-step moments, I like breakdowns, and you're like, all right, try this out. It's got a little bit more flavor than what you're looking for, but I guarantee there are things you're going to latch on to.
All the flavors are spicy. And this is Italian, so it's probably got pasta in it.
So overall, I'm going to give this 4 stars. I really dug it. I had a great time with it. In fact, I need to listen to it more because, again, there's elements in here that I really dig, and there's parts of this band that remind me of a whole slew of other bands that I really enjoy. But for the most part, this was heavy as shit. A bunch of chuggy grooves, a bunch of beatdown moments. In fact, once again, I think there are enough beatdown moments in here to definitely catch multiple felony assault charges. Every song was full of great riffs. The vocals didn't piss me off because, once again, normally it's full of pig squeals, and I don't like that at all. But, like, there's just a deep, low gurgle all the time, and it sounds like he was choking on vomit, and vomit the soul. That's what it is.
It's a Campbell Corpse reference.
Always hooky, too. I wasn't expecting that because I have listened to some brutal death metal in the past that is just straight brutal, but the melody in the tremolo just allows for a bunch of hooky moments, very riffy, brutal as shit, 4 stars. I'm probably going to listen to it more. If you're a fan of Suffocation, Dying Fetus, Morbid Angel, Cryptopsy, Benighted, at least the last record of Benighted, I would say. Even some Beneath the Massacre moments I caught on to just without all of the noodly wankery. You're probably going to dig this. I'd recommend checking it out.
I am also going to go with the 4. Honestly, I think this is a huge step up from the last one. You know, it probably has to do with the retooled lineup, but I think Max has found a solid crew here. This album packs a different punch, but a familiar punch at the same time. Like, yeah, it has all the tropes of stuff that I would look for in brutal death metal. Slams, blast beats, insanely just brutal riffing across the board, but it's done in such a way that I would compare to like Dying Fetus in terms of their formula. Like, it's brutal as hell, but it's got hooks, and that is every song in here. Like, every song in here has like some just killer riffy moments, good groovy breakdowns, and I gotta give it to the production too. Like, this more full sound, and you know, the 2 guitar attack I think is really working here. Again, it's not doing anything new. It's not reinventing the brutal reel to roll over, I don't know, orphans or whatever they do there, but it's executing it really well. And some of the stuff on here is relatively new for this band in terms of like just different dynamics on here. Across the board, this thing is just an absolutely savage, brutal album. If you're a big fan of Dying Fetus especially. And of course, like, you know, some of the staples of Italian brutal death metal, I would definitely say like early Hideous Divinity, Hour of Penance, Devangelic, especially their earlier stuff too. And of course, stuff like Suffocation as well. This is just absolutely savage, riffy, brutal death metal. And again, if someone approached me and said, hey, I'm looking to try to get into this style, I would actually recommend this album because it's got riffs, it's got hooks. This thing's just absolutely savage, and yeah, you guys should check it out. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon if you'd like to help us out there. There's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also in our channel up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats, too. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
And as always, tons of content coming from Thralls of Metal, album reviews. We're going to finally sit down and do the Meshuggah ranking, which is going to be a trip, for sure. No doubt. I fucking hate rankings. Just kidding. His States of Metal and all the other wild stuff he does, collection updates, because, you know, why stop at 10,000 CDs when you get 11,000 or 12 or who knows. But yeah, collection updates, tons of stuff coming. We do it all for you guys. We appreciate you. We thank you. We can't believe you still watch us 5 years later into this thing, because crazy. I never thought I would ever get this big, and it just keeps on growing, and that's wild to me too. But
that's what she said.
Anyway, we do this all for you. We appreciate all of you that subscribe and follow us and talk to us. We enjoyed running into you guys at Maryland Death Fest. I'm sure we'll enjoy running into some of you guys at Full Terror Assault. We're always doing stuff. You're always doing stuff, but we appreciate you doing stuff together with us.
That
Right.
was kind of awkward. Whatever.
I'm
Yeah.
so awkward.
No one here is arguing. No, seriously though, you guys are absolutely amazing. I think he pretty much summed up everything I would say and wouldn't say. So one more big thank you, and we will catch you later.